We have never seen anything like this.
By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do these things?
He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him.
Where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him?
Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him.
Well, thanks so much. I'm so grateful to be able to be here with you again this year, and just grateful for the partnership Wallula Christian Church has with all the churches in Leavenworth County, but especially with Westside Leavenworth, and just thankful for that opportunity to serve with you guys and share the love of Jesus in Leavenworth County. And so just thanks for having me again. Most of you know that it's March Madness, that NCAA basketball tournament is going on right now. It's been a little rough on the local schools this year, and so I don't know if you're riding high or struggling a little bit with the tournament this year. I don't know where your brackets are, but most of us are aware of March Madness. Fewer of us, though, are aware of Madness. That during the month of March, the NCAAs also have their wrestling competition going on. In fact, just last night, the finals were conducted in Philadelphia, and some exciting things happened. My son keeps me updated via text message of this. One young man won a national championship for the 5th consecutive year. You do the math there, that's a little funny, but 5 years in college, this whole COVID thing, hopefully that never happens again, right? But good for him. And there was an upset, I guess, over an Olympic champion. And so fun things with madness. My son got involved in wrestling when he was in middle school many years ago. And I never wrestled in high school or followed that as a kid or anything. And so when my son got involved in wrestling in middle school and high school, I had to learn the sport as we went along. And consequently, I was sort of a non-participant in the stands. You know, I didn't have much to say. I didn't have any advice to offer him. Maybe that's why he really enjoyed it. You know, I didn't have anything to tell him, hey, do this or do that. Dad says. Yeah, I didn't have any of that. And I just watched from the stands. I was fascinated, though, by wrestling parents, because nobody coaches from the stands like wrestling parents. You know, they have so much encouragement that they want to offer their young person wrestling. And I was especially fascinated by wrestling moms, because there's a transformation that takes place with wrestling moms. One minute, they are sweet and just, Johnny, let me peel this orange slice for you. You need some energy for the next match. But when Johnny got on the wrestling mat, something overcame those wrestling moms. And that same, let me peel the orange slice, get this banana ready for you, would suddenly be heard saying, shove his face into the mat. It was my favorite piece of wrestling advice. Just shove his face into the mat. A complete transformation came over these wrestling moms. And did you know that in the New Testament, when the New Testament talks about spiritual warfare, it uses the language of wrestling? It talks about hand-to-hand combat, wrestling with those spiritual forces. And for sure, if we can come to grips with the fact that the spiritual realm is a reality. You know, this natural world, the trees we see growing, the grass grows, the chairs that we're sitting on, these things that we can touch and feel, we can understand and we can see that. But just as real is the spiritual realm, and we need to be transformed to be able to sort of conduct ourselves in that realm, to stand up to that realm, to make a difference in this world and with the combatants from that realm. And I think there's a story in Mark, the 5th chapter, the first 20 verses, that help us to understand that transformation a little better. It's the story of Jesus. And Jesus, Mark gets right into it. You know, you read the Gospel of Mark and you jump right in to the ministry of Jesus. He starts, a little bit with John the Baptist, but then Jesus is there and he's teaching and preaching. And we've seen him do some amazing things already in this series in the Gospel of Mark. But he gets to this point where he's really starting to teach his disciples and the crowds that are gathering, and he's teaching through these little stories that we call parables. And I don't know if Jesus is frustrated or the crowds are frustrated, but there's a disconnect between Jesus teaching in parables and the crowds are struggling to understand this. And Jesus said, that's part of the reason I'm teaching in parables. And it's this weird kind of comment that I'm not sure who's more frustrated. But at a certain point, Jesus said, guys, to his closest 12 friends, those disciples, he said, we got to get in a boat. We're going to the other side. And so they start across the Sea of Galilee. It would be normally about a 2.5, I like to say a 3-hour tour, across the Sea of Galilee. It would be about that time range, but there was a storm that came up. And it was a storm that was so big and so violent that these fishermen by trade, many of the disciples were fishermen by trade, they were used to being in boats. They were used to sort of dealing with these circumstances, but this storm got to them. And it scared them to the point where, I love this, Jesus was taking a nap in the front of the boat, and they wake him up, and Jesus is like, why'd you wake me up? And they look around at the storm. And so Jesus calms the waves and the storm, and then the disciples are, talking with one another. Who's this guy that even the waves and the wind obey him? Who is this? I just want to know, how far into that journey did that calming of the storm take place? How much longer were they in the boat together? Because I just like to imagine Jesus going back to the front of the boat, like, don't bother me for the rest of the trip. I'm finishing my nap. And as he lays down to take that nap, they're saying, what is going on with this guy? And he can calm the storm, and he just made it stop. And I just imagine Jesus thinking. I don't think he said it to them. I just think he thought, guys, you haven't seen anything yet. There's so much more. And they land on that little bank on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And as soon as Jesus steps out of the boat, they're confronted by this man. I'm not sure what they heard first. I think they heard something before they saw something. And I wonder if it was the chains clanging, these chains that the townspeople and his family maybe even had tried to bind this man with to subdue him. These chains that he had broken free from and were just clanging as he ran. And he was running towards Jesus. It wasn't a chariots of fire, sort of a majestic, graceful run. It was a wild, flailing run. And I wonder if they heard the chains, or if they heard the pounding of his feet, or maybe they heard the grunts as he labored to get close to Jesus. Perhaps he was crying out already, because when he arrived and fell at Jesus' feet, he cried out, "What do you want with me? Why are you bothering us? Leave us alone, Jesus." Because Jesus was already calling out the unclean spirit in this man. And he starts this conversation, Jesus, with the demon-possessed man. Really, he's talking to the demons? I don't know. I like to believe that Jesus is looking into this man's eyes, and he's trying to reach through kind of all that spiritual debris to get to the heart and soul of the man. But he says, "What's your name?" And the demons respond, "Legion, for we are many." This guy wasn't possessed, overwhelmed by only one demon. That would be enough. Not by 2 demons, but maybe by thousands of demons. We are many. And they begin to bargain with Jesus because they know their fate. These guys know who they are up against. They know they don't have any authority to manage this situation. They can't, in other words, defeat Jesus. They're going to be pinned. And so they say, don't send us away. Don't end our time on this earth. There's some pigs over there. Send us into those pigs. And so Jesus sends the demons into the pigs. And I'm not sure how many pigs there were in this drove. My friend Joe told me it was a drove of pigs, so I'm learning even today. They sent these demons into this drove of pigs. I don't know how many pigs were in this drove. Maybe there were 1,000 pigs. And so maybe there were a couple demons for every pig. I don't know. But it was enough to send these pigs over that cliff that they were on. And they just plummeted to their death. All this wasted bacon over the side of the cliff. And the folks who were responsible for looking after those pigs, well, they were concerned. So they ran back to town to tell the owners of the pigs, you've got to come and see what just happened out here. And they bring the townspeople back. And when the owners of those pigs arrive, they see a couple of things. They see their livelihood gone. Right? They've got to deal with that. And then they see this man that, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but I heard a preacher when I was in junior high. He preached this passage, and he called the man possessed by demons Crazy Harry. And that had to be the kind of names that this guy was called. He's out of his head. He's crazy. He's uncontrollable. And here's the guy that they had chained up, that they had kicked out of town, that they had sent to live in the caves in the cemetery. Here he was sitting in his right mind at the feet of Jesus. This man who had once been naked was now clothed, maybe in the cloak of Jesus. And they respond in absolute fear, shock. They say, Jesus, you've got to go. We don't know how to deal with this. You've got to get out of here. And so as Jesus begins to get into the boat to leave, this man who he has just healed, he's begging him, Jesus, let me go. And Jesus said, no, you're going to stay here. I need you to go back to your friends. I need you to go back to your family. And I need you to tell them the good things that God has done for you. Tell them how much mercy he has shown you. And so Jesus and the man go in separate directions. It's this amazing story that teaches us that Jesus totally and completely transforms. He totally and completely transforms. And certainly, there's complete and total transformation in the story in Mark chapter 5. And the good news for us today is Jesus is still in this business of total and complete transformation. I think in Mark chapter 5, the first 20 verses, it lays out for us 4 truths that help us to understand this complete and total transformation. If you haven't already, open your Bibles to Mark the 5th chapter. We're going to walk our way through these 4 truths this morning. Truth number one is that Jesus will meet you where you are. The first couple of verses here in chapter 5 say, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. And so we mentioned in the story that Jesus is maybe frustrated, or the crowds are frustrated, or maybe Jesus just needs a break from the crowds, and so he sets off with his disciples to cross the Sea of Galilee. And I don't really know a good reason that Jesus would do this other than he wanted a couple of things to happen. He wanted to be in the middle of that storm to calm it for his disciples, and he wanted to meet this man on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And so with as much purpose as possible, Jesus heads to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And then Mark loves this word, immediately. When Jesus stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. You'll read that word immediately over and over in the Gospel of Mark. Way back in Mark chapter 1, about verses 9 and 10, you read it initially, and it's at the scene of Jesus' baptism. And when Jesus was lowered in the water and he was raised up, immediately, Mark said, that the heavens were torn apart. That Greek word for torn apart is schizo. And it just, we picture the scene and we imagine it to be sort of calm and peaceful. I'm not so sure it was. It's the same Greek word that when Jesus and his disciples would have read the Old Testament in Greek, they would have read what we call the Septuagint. And it's the same Greek word that shows up there in the Septuagint to describe the parting of the Red Sea. Now, we sort of cleaned that Sunday school story up too, but I think there wasn't a gentle sort of standing by of the waves. I imagine that it was sort of this violent separating of the waters to allow hundreds of thousands of Israelites to cross through on dry ground. And I know that this dove descends as Jesus is baptized, but I wonder if there wasn't a little more of a storm scene kind of setting as the heavens are torn open. And we get that same tearing open of the heavens, the same collision of the natural world and the spiritual realm here in Mark chapter 5. Immediately as Jesus steps out of the boat, this man possessed by these demons runs up to him. He lived among the tombs and no one could bind him anymore, verse 3 says, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountain, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. So I want to zero in on another word here. If we start with immediately in this collision of the spiritual and natural realm, and now in my Bible, I just circled the word afar. And it's not because I'm concerned about the actual distance that this man had to cover as he ran and approached Jesus. But did you catch the description of this guy? I mean, he's naked, literally naked. He's been living in these tombs, these caves, for as long as he can remember. If you sort of imagine all the things that might occur if you were living in the elements, in caves, for months at a time, you know, what kinds of stuff might happen to you? You wouldn't have access to clean clothes. This guy didn't not only not have clean clothes, he didn't have any clothes. He was being chained up because he was so out of control, and these demons would break those chains apart. He was so out of control that he was beating himself and cutting himself with stones. I think what you're really getting at is a guy who is so overwhelmed spiritually that he's doing anything he can to sort of end his situation, to kill himself. He didn't have access to, any kind of personal hygiene. There was nowhere to bathe. There was nowhere to clean up. There was no satisfactory place to use the restroom. All of those things that you think about, if you're just living in a cave, what might happen to you? They had happened to this guy. He was so far from Jesus. No matter the distance that he had to run, he was so far from being in a right relationship with Jesus. I know that some of you are sitting there. I don't know what your spiritual life is like. I don't know your relationship with Jesus. And I know some of you are saying, look, Lance, it's different today. The choices that I've made today, that maybe I've just put in place in the last couple of weeks or the last months, that I can start seeing my life, my relationships, they're starting to unravel again. You don't understand the sin that has been present in my life, maybe not for a couple of weeks, but for months and months or years and years. Lance, you don't understand. I'm willing to admit that I don't. Right? I might not be able to, but I want you to know that you can't get further away from Jesus than this guy was. Locked up, chained in the cemetery, beating himself nearly to death. And there Jesus is, crossing that sea on purpose to meet him. Man, Jesus absolutely will meet you where you are. Let's go on to truth number 2. Truth number 2 is that the enemy's only goal is destruction. Verse 9 here in chapter 5 says, and Jesus asked him, what is your name? He replied, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. And so Jesus starts this conversation. And I really believe he's trying to reach the man, but he has this conversation and he gets involved in this conversation with the demons. Maybe that's where Jesus was going. I don't know. But in any event, the demons respond. You know, we're Legion. That word would describe a group of military personnel that numbered anywhere between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers. And so I'm not sure if this guy was possessed by 4,000 to 6,000 demons, but it was more than enough. He was completely overwhelmed spiritually. These unclean spirits were in absolute control, and to the point where they are answering for him. My name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged them earnestly not to send them out of the country. That's our first hint here. Well, our first hint is that they call Jesus the Son of the Most High God. And this is our second hint, that these demons, they know, they kind of know the hierarchy here. They know that they cannot do battle and win in this wrestling match, this hand-to-hand combat. They are not winning with Jesus. And so they ask him, don't send us out of the country. Don't send us too far. And when Luke tells this story in his gospel, he says that the demons asked not to be sent into the abyss. These demons, maybe fallen angels. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. In other words, no matter how we get to the point where demons exist, and God has this plan for them. They will be thrown into this pit, this abyss, for all of eternity. And these demons possessing this man knew their eternal destiny. And they are begging Jesus, don't send us to our eternal end yet. Verse 11 says, now a great herd of pigs. The Bible says herd, Joe. Now a great herd of pigs. I'm sorry. That was only for my benefit. I apologize. Now, a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. This confrontation has begun, and Jesus allows these spirits, these unclean spirits, the demons, to enter this group of pigs. And I'm not sure I can explain this. I don't know why Jesus allows this absolutely. But the demons, in any event, when they get into the pigs, they do what demons do. They destroy that drove of pigs. They send them over the cliffs. They just wipe them out. Man, demons, the enemy, that's what he is about. He will try to destroy us through his lies. He will try to destroy us through temptation. He will try to destroy this man through the possession, by possessing him with all of these demons. You might be reading this story and you say, man, I'm glad that this stuff doesn't happen today. Right? You might be saying, I'm glad that these conflicts, these run-ins with the spiritual realm just don't happen today. I think I would have to beg to differ. Oh, this spiritual realm is a reality. And we have to figure out how do we armor ourselves? How do we prepare ourselves to do battle in it? I don't want to take this too far, all right? And I understand if you walk away from this shaking your head. And I'm going to share a story I'm embarrassed to share. I don't like, because it really makes me look like an old fat man. And I know I look like an old fat man because I am an old fat man. But I don't like to say out loud that I'm an old fat man. But I am a little bit. I'm not quite to the age where I need to only use sermon illustrations about my medical ailments, but that's what we're going to do today, all right? So I deal with this, this infliction that I just read a biography of Martin Luther, and I learned that Martin Luther had gout. That's what I'm going to talk about. And so basically, Martin Luther and I are the same, is what I want you to hear. And but anyway, I have deal with gout sometimes, and it flares up, and it get in joints, and it's very painful. And I know, look, I got to be an old fat man pretty much on my own, okay? And there are consequences to choices and all of that. There are natural explanations for why these events occur. But I was just on vacation. I was heading home, and I'm kind of working on this message on vacation a little bit, and I'm repeating it out loud, and thinking as I'm driving and doing those things. And I had got this gout flare up a few days before we leave, and I take some medicine. It feels pretty good. And I'm on my way home, and I think it's going to be fine for the weekend. And then yesterday, it just hurt so bad. Like I could get around, but it really was painful. And I'm like, I'm going to look like a real idiot. I'm going to be so embarrassed because I'm going to stumble and bumble on stage more than I usually do. And man, I'm just thinking, I know there's all kinds of explanations, but why on Saturday? Why do those lies? Nobody's going to listen because they're going to see you limping. Right? Nobody's going to pay attention because you did this to yourself. Right? Why do those lies come in on a Saturday before I'm sharing the story of Jesus? I don't want to make too much of this because I know it snows on other days, and folks have to decide, are we canceling things on other days? But why? Man, is anybody else with me that it always snows on Saturday night? What is the deal with that? I don't want to take these things too far, right? But man, the enemy will use any foothold he can to try to do what the enemy does, which is destroy things. Whatever lie he can tell you, whatever temptation he can put in front of you, whatever situation he can kind of grow from in your life, he's going to do that. Man, those demons, they go into these pigs and they run them over the cliff, and pretty soon they have to go, and the folks watching after those pigs, they go into town. Verse 14 says that the herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And so the townspeople come out and they hear the story and they see what happened to this guy and they see what happened to the pigs, and the enemy has sort of succeeded up to this point a little bit. He's maybe put a bad name on Jesus. They blame this situation on Jesus. He has destroyed those pigs. And the enemy's only goal, whether in Mark chapter 5 or in Leavenworth County in 2025, the enemy's only goal is destruction. Truth number three is that Jesus will never force himself on you. Let's go on. So the townspeople, they see what has happened, and they begin in verse 17 to beg Jesus to depart from the region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might go with him. And so the townspeople, they see the loss of their livelihood. These pigs are gone. They see this man. They can't quite make sense of that, and they are afraid, and they ask Jesus, "You've got to go." I heard one scholar, one author describe Jesus as a gentleman, that he'll never force himself on you. And so when this group of townspeople say, "You've got to go," Jesus starts to get into the boat. Jesus isn't going to force himself onto you. right? He's not going to make you enter into a relationship, begin to try to trust him and know him. But just understand today that this is your invitation to say yes to Jesus. That if you're here this morning and you've been kind of wondering who this Jesus guy is he worth checking out? Is he worth following? What does it mean to have a relationship with him? Today is the day that you can begin that journey in trusting him. I remember when I started that journey as a kid. I was 14, 15 years old. I was sitting in a church service like I had sat in, so many times before. And I had been thinking, I need to say yes to Jesus. I need to be baptized. And in that little church I grew up in, every Sunday, it didn't matter if there was a guest in the church or everybody in the church had been a member for years. At the end of that sermon, there was going to be an invitation. And that preacher would say, if you want to say yes to Jesus in baptism, come forward as we sing this last song. Man, they started singing that song. My parents always sat on the third row on the left-hand side. It was not a long walk, right? Just 3 rows of chairs. But as they sang that song, it took all the courage I could muster to walk forward. And I sat down on that front row, and the preacher came to meet me. He said, Lance, what are you doing? And I said, I think I want to be baptized today. And he said, okay, there's something I need you to know. I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, it was the middle of February. It was cold outside. And he said, I didn't turn on the heater to the baptistry today. Are you sure you want to do this today? I mean, I know it was only 3 rows of chairs, but it had taken so much courage to kind of make that short journey that I said, yeah, I think I have to do that today. And you know what I've never thought about is that maybe that guy didn't want to get into that water with me. But I'm like, I need to do this. And he said, okay. And so we went, and he baptized me, and he lowered me under the water, and he lifted me up, and it was freezing cold. And I was shaking. I wasn't sure that the water, Holy Spirit, still not sure today. I don't really, anyway. And so, but we did it. I took that short journey, right? I get it. Those three rows of chairs, it could have been a mile. It was so hard to put one foot in front of another and just say, I have to, on this day, submit to Jesus as Lord. It's all I can do. It's all I can do. Man, if you are in a place where you feel overwhelmed, like this guy in Mark chapter 5 had to feel overwhelmed, today is the day. Put one foot in front of the other and begin that walk in relationship with Jesus. Talk to the staff here at Westside, to Joe or Ryan, or sign up, however you sign up for those baptisms on Easter Sunday. Be a part of that. Get in on that. Right? Talk to somebody you see on stage. You can talk to me. Talk to the person who invited you. What do these steps look like to begin this walk with Jesus? Man, he won't force himself on you. But today is the day you can accept that invitation. Truth number 4 is that you are exactly where Jesus needs you. As Jesus was getting in the boat in verse 18, to depart from that region, as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. Who could blame this guy? I'm not sure why exactly he wanted to go with Jesus, but who could blame him? I mean, his life had been completely and totally transformed. And maybe it was fear that the demons would, come back. And so he wanted to stay close to Jesus. If I can just stay close to Jesus, I'll be okay. And so he was inviting himself into that boat with Jesus. Maybe he was just overwhelmed by the love and the transformation that had just occurred. I can believe that. I want to do everything I can for Jesus. Let me go with you. And so he begged for Jesus to let him into that boat. I'm not sure why Jesus said no. But my inclination is that I think one of the fears that maybe had driven that guy to approach that boat and say, Jesus, would it be okay if I go with you? Is because in his heart of hearts, he didn't have any confidence that the people who had tried to chain him up, the family that had probably kicked him out, the town, the community that he was going back to, in his hearts of hearts, I don't know if he believed that they would trust the transformation that had taken place in his life, the change that had occurred, that he was new and made new and new from this day forward. And I think it was that fear that had driven him to Jesus. And Jesus said, look, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go back and I need you to talk to your friends and your family and everybody that you see. And I need you to tell them the good things that God has done for you. I need you to share with them how much mercy God has had on you today. And that guy left and he became a missionary to those 10 cities in that area. So much that when Jesus returns, he won't return to one demon-possessed man running to the boat, but crowds of people bringing their hurt and sick to meet Jesus. Folks, if you have an answer to either of those questions, what good things has God done for you? How much mercy has Jesus shown you? If you have answers to those two questions, you are equipped to be a missionary just like this man was a missionary. There's no reason that parents on your kids' ball team don't know the good things that God has done for you or how much mercy Jesus has shown you. There's no reason that someone in your workplace or on your bowling team or your neighbor next door in your neighborhood, there's no reason that they don't know how good God has been to you or how much mercy Jesus has shown you. I love this partnership, this United as One partnership with churches in Leavenworth County. There is so much good that happens through this partnership. And I think there is one last kind of great hurdle that needs to be overcome. And that's the sending out of, this massive force, this army of missionaries into Leavenworth County, into our communities. There's no reason that anyone in Leavenworth County ought not know the good things God has done for us, the mercy that Jesus has shown to us. Man, grab those Easter invitations that are on your chairs. This one's to Wallula. You don't have to use that one. Use this one. Take those Easter invitations and share them with your friends and family. Just serve one service. Sit next to the person you invited to that next service. Just see what Jesus will do through that simple invitation. He has you just where he needs you. We don't have to go across the state or the country or around the world to be missionaries for him. How much has the Lord done for you? How much mercy has he shown you? Jesus totally and completely transforms. If he's transformed your life, share that transformation with others. A couple years ago, my son invited me. He said, the NCAA wrestling championships are going to be in Kansas City, and so we ought to go one day. And I think we went to the quarterfinals or whatever, and I don't know. We went one day and watched this, and we had tickets, but barely. They were on the second row of the T-Mobile Center, that empty arena downtown. And so we were on the very top, not the very top, the second to the very top row in that arena, watching these 8 mats and wrestling going on. And we were surrounded by Penn State fans. And man, Penn State fans are passionate wrestling fans. And so when one of their wrestlers got on the mat, I was just so amazed because they started to yell their encouragement and directions and to offer advice on how their wrestler ought to be wrestling, the moves that he ought to be putting on the other wrestler. And I just sat back again as a non-participant and just thought, you folks are crazy. There's no chance that guy hears you. You are so far away. And what's more, these are world-class athletes. So many of these NCAA champions have already won like gold medals. You know, they're on the highest level of wrestling competition that there is. They don't need your help. I wanted to tell these folks, but I just sat back as a non-participant and watched the wrestling going on. And I suppose that's okay at a sporting event. I suppose that's okay at a concert. That's okay at this wrestling match to be a non-participant. But man, these conflicts between the natural world and the spiritual realm, this constant battle that we find ourselves in, it's no longer okay to sit back as non-participants. If Jesus totally and completely transforms, we need to be in the middle of the fight. We need to be sharing how he has made a difference in our lives with those around us. We can't sit back and watch. It's time to get into the game. And Jesus totally and completely transforms. Would you pray with me? Father God, we love you so much, and we thank you for loving us. I'm just so grateful that you are a big, big God, that you are absolutely in control of everything that is happening in this world. Sometimes, God, we can be overwhelmed by the natural disasters or the storms in life. We can be overwhelmed, God, by the things we see happening around the world, the wars and the rumors of wars, God. We can be overwhelmed by politics and the decisions that we agree with or disagree with that our elected officials are making. God, all that stuff is going on, and I know that it's just a murmur of the real battle that is happening in the unseen realm, God. And Father, we just want to say yes to you. We want to follow after you. We want a relationship with Jesus that completely and totally transforms us and makes us ready for battle every day. God, we know that only you can bring that kind of peace into our life, that total transformation. We love you and we thank you for Jesus. It's in his name. Amen.